what is statement. Guys, statement is nothing but it is an instruction to perform a specific action or to perform a specific task. For example, I'm going to create something called variable name. So here I am telling to create a variable called name. That means I am telling to do some action, to do some specific task. Okay, so that is about statement. Now what is function statement? Function statement is nothing but defining function with function name right after function keyword. So that means let's write here. I'm going to write function. Let's write here function. I'm going to write function and then let's give it a name called greet. Okay, and let's open the body and let's write here console.log. Let's say hey. Okay, so here this is a function keyword and followed by we are writing a name of the function, that is greet, right? So this is what it is telling, right? Function with function name right after function keyword. So this is an example of function statement. Okay, so let's call this function. Along with that, let's print the function. I'm gonna write console.log. Let's write here greet. Okay, now let's go to browser and let's see what we'll get. So I'm gonna refresh this page. You can see we got hey, that is inside the function, and we got entire function body because we have written console.log and we are invoking the function. Okay, now this is good. Now the question is, what will happen if I copy these two things, if I cut this from here and if I paste them above the function? That means before the function is defined, right? This is the function definition and I'm trying to invoke function statement before defining it, and I'm printing also. Now tell me or guess what will be the output. Okay, so let me open the browser. You can see still we got hey and function body. I'm going to refresh this once again. You can see it is still printing hey and function. This phenomenon, that means the ability to access or to invoke function statement before even defining it, is happening because of hoisting. That means in case of function statement, we can access it or we can invoke it even before defining the function statement. This is possible because of the concept called hoisting. Now what is this hoisting? Right, what is this hoisting? So guys, I have created a separate video on hoisting which will explain in depth about what is hoisting. Please go and watch that video and then come back to this, then everything will make more sense to you. But for now, let's quickly understand what is hoisting. So guys, in JavaScript, functions and variables are hoisted. That means memory is allocated to variables and functions. Whenever JavaScript code is executed, a global execution context is created, and that is created in two phases. One is memory creation phase and other one is execution phase. In the first phase, memory is allocated to all variables and functions already. Okay, so it will be created in two phases like I have explained here. Okay, this is the memory creation phase. In the creation phase, memory is allocated to all variables and functions. So there are two things, right? One is variable and other one is function. So for variable, only declaration will happen. That means let's say we have variable called a equal to 7. In the memory, 7 will not be stored. Instead of 7, a default value or a default initialization or a default label or think like a default sticker will be given, that is undefined. Okay, the actual value will not be assigned. Instead, a placeholder called undefined will be assigned to this variable a. Right, this is what happens in case of variables in memory creation phase. If I go to my video, that is what I explained here. You can see I have variable name equal to Srikanth, and in the memory creation phase, name equal to undefined. You see, that is what I'm telling. We'll see that in a bit in the code, but let's understand here. Okay, this is what happens with variable. Now, in case of function, entire function will sit in the memory, not undefined, not anything. Total function, total this greet function will go and sit in the memory. Right, that is what happens in case of variables and in case of functions in memory creation phase. Okay, let's understand that more clearly. Okay, so I'm gonna come to VS Code. Let's say I'm gonna write variable actor equal to, let's say I'm gonna write Peter. Right, now let's print that actor in the above line. That means before assigning it. So I'm gonna write here console.log. I'm gonna write here actor. Okay, now let's go to browser and let's go to our page and let's refresh this one. I'm gonna refresh it. You see guys, we got undefined. That means we are in memory creation phase and the label is assigned or the default initialization happened, that is undefined. Here the same thing is happening, undefined. So we are trying to print that before even initializing. That is why we are getting undefined. Now if I come here and if I cut this one and if I paste it here after initialization, now if I go here, if I refresh this one, we'll get Peter. right? Because in the execution phase, when JavaScript code starts executing line by line, instead of by cutting that undefined, it will assign the actual value, which is called Peter. Okay, there are two phases, right? If you remember, there are two phases. In first phase, it will be undefined, but when the second phase starts, when JavaScript code actually starts executing the code, it will remove this undefined and it will execute with the actual value that is initialized. That means Peter. So that is why we are seeing the output as Peter here. Okay. Now, in case of functions, what I told entire function will sit in the memory, right? In case of functions. So that is why when you're trying to invoke function statement before even defining it, still it's working. Still we are getting the full function because JavaScript already knows about this function. This is already sitting in the memory. Okay. So this is how it will work. Now let me open my image. Yeah, here we have seen all these things, and the function declaration and function statement both are same. Okay. And here there is one last point, that is function declaration or function statement must have a name. That means if I come here and if I remove this grid, let's say I'm going to remove this one, and let's see what we'll get in the output. Yeah, let's refresh this one. You see guys, we are getting function statements require a function name, right? That is what we have seen here. That means function statement must have a name. So I'm going to put it back as grid. Okay, so this is about function statement. Now let's see what is expression and what is function expression. So I'm gonna scroll down. Yeah, what is expression? So expression is nothing but it is a unit of code that produces a value. So let's see what is expression. Here let's say I'm gonna write 10 plus 3. You can see this is giving output as 13. That means it is producing some value. This is an example of expression. Likewise, I can write 10 greater than 3. It will also give us some value, right? Or I can write something called Srikanth. Now this will give us the value called Srikanth because this is evaluated as a string, right? So this is what expression means. It will always produce some output, some value. Okay. Now what is function expression? Function expression is nothing but it is a way to define a function as a value. That means we should define the entire function like a value, as a value to another value. Okay. So let me not confuse you. I'm going to come here and let's say I'm going to write variable greet1 equal to function, and I'm going to write here console.log. Let's say hello. You can see this is a variable and this is a function body. I am assigning the entire function to a variable like a value, like this is some value. Okay. So this is what function expression. Now the question is how you are able to assign entire function as a value to something else, like how you are assigning this function to a variable. This is happening because of the beautiful concept or the beautiful nature of functions in JavaScript. That is, functions in JavaScript are first class functions. That means you can treat function just like you treat any other type like number or string. That means you can pass function to another function as an argument, or you can return the function as a value from another function. You can put function inside an array, right? You can do all these things like you do with numbers and strings with the functions. I don't know how it will work with other programming languages, but in case of JavaScript, it will work. And that is why functions are just like, supernatural. Even science can't tell why they are so much powerful. Okay. So that is why we can assign function as a value, which is called function expression. Okay. Now let's call this function. I'm going to write here greet1. Greet1. And let's also print that function. So console.log, I will write greet1, right? Before this, let's comment the above ones just for better understanding. I'm going to comment all these things and this one. Yeah, awesome. Now let's go to browser. Okay, we got output as hello and we got the entire function body, which we have typed here, right? Now the same thing. What happens if I cut these two things here and if I paste them above the function expression like we did with function statement? Okay, now tell me, based on the concept of hoisting, what will I get in the output for this 40th line and for this 41st line? Let's go to browser and let's see. Yeah, you can see guys, we got greet1 is not a function. Okay, sorry, I'll just put this above the greet1. Yeah, now let's go to browser and let's refresh this one once again. Yeah, you see, first we got undefined and then we got greet1 is not a function. So what is happening here? Why we got undefined and why we got greet1 is not a function? So guys, tell me what will happen in memory creation phase. To understand that, let's again go to our hoisting page. In memory creation phase, we have seen that a memory is allocated to variables and functions, and for variables, instead of actual value, a placeholder called undefined is given, right? That is we have seen. So the same thing is happening here also. That means think of this function as a value. So when you create a variable called greet1, or when you create any variable, when you assign something to that, this something will not sit in memory creation phase, right? Instead, it will assign something called undefined, right? Undefined. So that is why when you print that, it is giving us undefined. And when you are invoking that, obviously undefined is not a function, right? So that is why it is saying greet1 is not a function. If I go here, you see, that is why it is saying greet1 is not a function. So it's very important to understand the error actually, like what error it is throwing and why it is throwing that particular error. This is where this is where he will ask you more tricky questions. Okay, so let me go back. Now, this is the main important difference between function statement and function expression, guys. In case of function expression, you cannot invoke or you cannot access function expression before writing it. Okay, but in case of function statement, you can invoke it or you can access it even before writing the function definition because of the concept called hoisting. Okay, this is main difference. Now let me go to my image. Yeah, we have seen what is expression, and we have seen function expression and anonymous function expression. So that means here, if you come here, you see this function doesn't have any name, right? It's just anonymous, like it doesn't have any name. I'm just assigning it to some variable called greet1, but this function itself is not having any name, right? So that is why this is called as anonymous function expression. I'm gonna write here anonymous function expression. Okay, now we have one more thing, that is named function expression. Named function expression. Yeah. Now what is this? So this is nothing but, let's say I'm gonna create a variable called greet2, and here I'm gonna write a function, and here we can give a separate name to this function. Let's say I'm gonna write say hello, and I'm gonna write console.log hi greet2. Okay, and let's invoke that function. So I'm gonna write greet2. Yeah. Okay, let's go to browser and let's refresh this one. Okay, sorry, let me comment these things. Yeah, so let me go to browser and let's refresh this again. Yeah, you see we got hi greet2. Now what happens when I invoke, let me hide this. Yeah, what happens when I invoke that function with its name, say hello. So I'm gonna write say hello. Say hello. Now let's see what will happen. I'm gonna go to browser and let's refresh it. You see, it is saying reference error, say hello is not defined. So that means whenever you write named function expression, whatever the name that you give to the function, by default this will be created as local variable. You can see when I hover the mouse, it is showing local function. So this say hello is local variable. You can only access this say hello inside this function body. That means I can write something called console.log. Let's say I'm gonna write say hello, and here let's comment this and let's invoke with greet2. Awesome. Now let's go to browser and let's refresh this. You see, we got greet2 and we got function definition, I mean entire function, because we are printing it inside the function body. This is where we can, this is where we can access this say hello function, right? So this is named function expression and this is anonymous function expression. Now one more major difference between function statement and function expression is function statement must have a name, like we have already seen, but in case of function expression it need not to have a name, like we can write anonymous function expressions also. Okay, so these are the two differences between function expression and function statement. Okay, so let me open my page once again. Yeah, we have covered anonymous function expression, named function expression, and function expression can be called or accessed only after function definition. We have seen that, and need not to have a name, which means we can write anonymous function expressions. Okay, now there is one last thing, guys, just give me 2 minutes. One last thing is there. What happens when you create function with let and const? We have seen function expression with where keyword, right? Now what happens when you create function expression with let and const keyword? So let's quickly check that. I'm gonna write here let greet final equal to function, I'm gonna write here, let's say console.log, let's write here hello final. Okay, now let's print this one. Actually, let's print this one, console.log, what is that, greet final. Now let's invoke that one, so I'm gonna write greet final. Yeah, now let's comment this thing for better understanding. So let me go to browser. Yeah, so let me refresh the page once. Yeah, you see guys, we got cannot access greet final before initialization. Now this is a different error, right? We have seen undefined, we have seen is not defined. Now this is a new error, that is cannot access greet final before initialization. So guys, that means what happens behind the scenes is, in case of hosting, where keyword is hosted and a default initialization will happen, which is undefined, right? But in case of let and const, hosting will happen, but this default initialization will not happen. That means it will not assign, in the memory creation phase, it will not assign any sticker or any label called undefined. So that is why it is saying you cannot access greet final before initialization. That means even undefined is also not assigned, even undefined is also not given. So that is why it is saying cannot access greet final before initialization. So JavaScript knows about that let and const keywords. JavaScript knows about this function. Only thing is that default initialization has not happened, right? The phase or the period of time where let and const keywords are hoisted but not accessible is known as temporal dead zone. Okay, here I've written that there's a name for the period during execution where let and const variables are hoisted but not accessible. This is called temporal dead zone. So this is why when you create function expressions with let or const keywords, and when you call or when you try to access them before, we will get this different error which is called cannot access greet final or cannot access function before initialization, right? Don't confuse. This is how you need to explain in the interview. Right now, these are the main differences between function expression, function statement, and function expression with let and const keyword. Okay, I hope you guys found the video useful. Please give it a like and subscribe, guys. Thank you.